Mr. Lamb. Mr. Barr, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you to Chairwoman Brownlee and Chairwoman Spire for your leadership, and also Ranking Member Dunn and Ranking Member Kelly. Thank you for hosting this joint hearing. I think it's excellent to continue to shine the light on this national tragedy of 20 suicides a day. Let me start with Dr. Van Winkle. Since I haven't had the benefit of your testimony as a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, I do want the DOD perspective here. As we're nearing 20 years of engagement in Iraq and Afghanistan, our longest engagement in U.S. history, it's my understanding that soldiers, particularly those in the Army, are deploying longer and for multiple deployments. As the director of the Office of Resiliency, how is your office taking into account the effect of these multiple deployments on service members and their families, these long deployments? I know it's very, very difficult for a lot of the veterans in my district.
Thank you for the question. It is certainly something that we're tracking, and with our collaborations with the family programs, we also track the impact on the families, understanding that that's an additional stress when the military member is overseas or deployed. Within the suicide space, as mentioned, there's no simple and direct connection between suicide and deployments at the aggregate level, but what we know is this is an individual stressor, that for some, when we talk about suicide as a combination of individual factors that we're tracking, this can certainly be a stressor that impacts them negatively. And so part of our work is certainly within the behavioral health side and within our leadership to have those conversations about the impact of deployment. And Captain Colston can talk a little bit more about how the deployment and the behavioral health work together.
One of the things that I just want to emphasize is we really make sure that we embed mental health care on deployments. So at the division level, there will be a psychiatrist deploying with the unit. And in fact, that's important because 18 to 25-year-olds often struggle with things like not just suicidality, but first break psychosis, first break mania, things that are dangerous in folks who are there to kill the enemy. So it's vitally important that we do that.
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate the DOD paying attention to that. Obviously, operational tempo could play a role in some of the suicide issues. Our colleague, Brian Mast, who, of course, is a combat veteran, wounded warrior himself, he approached me last Congress with an idea and legislation to require an oath of exit so that service members obviously who were part of a team, part of a unit, a band of brothers who have who feel a strong sense of loyalty to each other, would basically take an oath upon a transition and discharge to each other that before they would cause harm to themselves, they would at least contact one of their former brothers in arms and let them know in advance. I thought that was a good idea, and my understanding is that DOD has kind of taken on that idea. Is that a good idea? Is that something that DOD is considering, an oath of exit, so that men and women, service members who leave the military are pledging an oath to each other that before they take their own lives or before they harm themselves, they will contact one of their former soldiers or sailors or airmen?
Well, I think in regard to all issues around safety, certainly, for those of us that have deployed, we met our affiliative needs with those folks that we were in the barracks with, that we were out in the field with. So yes, I think in regard to things like safety planning, which we do for suicidal people, that's a critical part of it. Telling your brothers and sisters that you're in pain is an important part of, what we do.
I think that's something we ought to pursue. Finally, Dr. Franklin, you've talked about the in-transition program, but let me talk specifically about medical records. I know we've increased a real effort to have that interoperability between medical records, but if a service member commits an act of self-harm or attempts to commit suicide while in the military, how is that information or medical documentation of that transferred to the VA?
As we stand right now, not under the new system is what you're asking me. That if they've made an attempt, harm to self, harm to others, it's in their medical record, and it travels with them as they leave the DOD over to the VA side through all the methods that we've discussed earlier.
Do we have confidence in that we're catching all of that?
I have quite a bit of confidence in it, but I'm happy to also do a review if that's something that would help, like just to do a random review. I can work with our DOD colleagues to scrub that.
Well, thanks. My time has expired, but obviously it's critically important that as a soldier or sailor is passed on to the VA, that their history of suicidality would be also transferred with those medical records.
One of the highest risk factors for suicide is a prior attempt, so absolutely.
I yield back. Thank
Yes.
you.